You have been lied to, not by historians, not by scientists, by a video, possibly several videos. And here is the wild part. The lie is so well constructed, so confidently delivered, so packed with real locations and real numbers and the names of real people, that millions of viewers believed every word of it. And it spread. And it kept spreading until people started asking a very different question. Not the question the videos wanted them to ask, a better one, a harder one, the real one. Because underneath all the manufactured mystery, underneath the fake researchers and the made-up statistics and the AI chatbot that never actually studied any ancient stone, underneath all of that, there is a genuine mystery, one that has stumped real scientists, real engineers, and real archaeologists for over a century. And the true story is more interesting than anything those viral videos invented. So let's go all the way through it. The lie first, then the truth, and then the part that will actually keep you up at night. There's a story that has been circulating all over YouTube, spreading through social media, racking up tens of millions of views across hundreds of channels. The story goes like this. Grok AI, the chatbot built by Elon Musk's company XAI, was recently given high-resolution scan data from the ancient granite quarries at Aswan in southern Egypt. The AI analyzed 847 individual cut marks in the granite. It found that the variation in cut size was only 4.3%. It found that the entry angle of the tool was consistent to within 2 degrees across the entire quarry. It identified microscopic spiral patterns and localized heat signatures consistent with powered rotary drilling. And when it ran all of that data against a database of modern and ancient tool signatures, it returned one result at 94% confidence. Industrial-grade rotary cutting with a diamond composite abrasive tip, a technology that did not exist until the 20th century. The videos claim researchers were shocked. They claim a Polish materials scientist named Dr. Thomas Kowalski confirmed everything under an electron microscope. They invoke the name of a real and famous American archaeologist, Dr. Sarah Parcak, and imply she was part of the investigation. And they end every single time with the same suggestion. Someone else was here. Something advanced. Something forgotten. Something the establishment does not want you to know about. It sounds convincing. It sounds like science. It has numbers and percentages and expert names and specific locations. And that is exactly why it spread so far so fast. Here is the problem. None of the core claims are real. When researchers actually went looking, they found that there is no published Grok AI analysis of the Aswan quarry. No study, no dataset, no research paper, no conference presentation, no peer review, nothing. The 847 individual cuts, the 4.3% variance, the 94% confidence score, these numbers were generated by an AI writing tool producing entertainment content, not by Grok analyzing ancient granite. The channels that produced these videos carry disclaimers buried in their descriptions, acknowledging that the content is AI-generated entertainment, not journalism, not research, entertainment. They present fabricated findings in a documentary style designed to sound like facts, and they do it well enough that even careful viewers get pulled in. Dr. Thomas Kowalski, the Polish material scientist who allegedly confirmed everything under an electron microscope, does not appear to exist in any academic database, university faculty directory, or scientific publication archive anywhere in the world. The name was invented. The research was invented. The electron microscope findings were invented. Dr. Sarah Parcak is a real person and a genuinely pioneering archaeologist who has reshaped how the field uses satellite imagery to locate ancient sites. She is a professor at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. She has never made any statement about Grok AI. She has never been involved in granite analysis at Aswan. She was used because she's real and famous, and her name makes the story feel more legitimate. Her actual work was borrowed without her knowledge to sell a fabricated narrative. So the Grok story is fiction. But here is the thing. The locations are real. The granite quarry at Aswan is real. The unfinished obelisk is real. The curved marks on the stone are real. The debate about what made them is real. And the genuine mystery of how the ancient Egyptians pulled off what they pulled off is very, very real. And here is where it gets genuinely interesting, because the truth requires no fabrication at all. And let's start with what we actually know about the marks. The Aswan granite quarries in southern Egypt are where the ancient Egyptians extracted much of the pink and red granite used across their civilization. Obelisks, statues, casing stones, temple blocks. Almost every piece of hard monumental granite in Egypt traces back to Aswan. The quarry still exists. You can walk through it today. Tourists do it every day. And when you walk through it, you see something that has genuinely puzzled researchers for a long time. Curved, scoop marks in the granite surfaces. Smooth, arcing depressions that repeat across the quarry walls and floors. Not random, not rough. Consistent looking. Regular looking. The mainstream explanation is that Egyptian workers produced these marks using dolerite pounding stones, Dolerite is a type of igneous rock, dense and tough, found naturally near the Aswan site. Workers would have used these stones to repeatedly strike the granite surface, gradually removing material in the way you might use a hammer to pound something into shape. The textbooks say this. Dolerite balls have been found at the site. The method is considered established. The issue that has frustrated researchers, and that these viral videos exploit, is that when people have actually tried to replicate the marks using dolerite stones, the results look different. Experimental archaeology has shown that dolerite pounding produces rough, uneven indentations, irregular pits, not the smooth, curved arcs that you see on the Aswan surfaces. That gap between the theory and the observed marks is real. Researchers have noted it. It has been discussed in the legitimate literature. But here's where the viral videos take a real question and invent a fake answer, because the gap between dolerite pounding marks and the Aswan marks does not require a lost civilization or industrial diamond rotary cutters to explain. In 1983, researchers at the Penn Museum ran an experiment. They used a copper tubular drill to bore into solid granite. Copper is softer than granite. By itself, the copper drill did not work well at all. But when they added abrasive powder to the cutting surface, the results changed dramatically. The drill worked, and the abrasive that worked best was corundum, crystalline aluminum oxide, rated 9 on the Mohs hardness scale, harder than granite. And when researchers examined the drill holes with an electron microscope, they found consistent concentric spiral patterns on the granite walls inside the holes. Patterns that look, under high magnification, like what you would expect from a precision rotary tool. This was not a new discovery when the viral videos started claiming it as evidence of ancient power tools. The spiral patterns have been known and understood since 1983. The corundum explanation has been published in the scientific literature for more than 40 years. And the evidence that ancient Egyptians actually used corundum as an abrasive? Real archaeologists found it, not in a Grok analysis. At the Great Temple of Aten in Amarna, researchers found actual abrasive powder inside ancient drill holes. The holes date to between 1353 and 1336 BC. The powder was rich in corundum. The Egyptians were using corundum-coated drills to bore through granite thousands of years ago. And when you drill with corundum, you produce spiral concentric marks, the same marks the viral videos use as evidence of alien power tools. The real story, the one without any fabrication, is that the ancient Egyptians were genuinely sophisticated engineers who used harder abrasive materials to cut stone that would otherwise resist their tools. They were not using magical technology. They were using mineral chemistry and mechanical intelligence, which, if you think about it, is arguably more impressive. Now let's talk about the unfinished obelisk, because that is where the real wonder lives. The unfinished obelisk at Aswan is one of the most astonishing objects in the ancient world. It would have been the largest obelisk ever quarried in Egypt, 42 meters tall and estimated to weigh somewhere around 200 tons, if it had ever been completed. Instead, it lies exactly where it was abandoned, still partially attached to the bedrock, frozen mid-process, a snapshot of ancient construction locked in stone for thousands of years. A crack appeared in the granite as the work progressed. The project was abandoned. And it has been sitting there ever since, giving researchers an extraordinary window into exactly how the Egyptians approached this kind of work. What the obelisk shows is a civilization operating at a level of organizational and engineering sophistication that is genuinely difficult to process. The scale of the commitment required to begin a project of that size, the planning, the labor, the logistics of eventually moving a 1,200-ton stone from a quarry in southern Egypt to a temple hundreds of miles away, represents a kind of ambition that modern people struggle to wrap their heads around. And the Egyptians were doing it without computers, without steel machinery, without motorized transport. But here's the thing. Recent actual research, the real kind, published in peer-reviewed journals, conducted by named researchers at verifiable institutions, has been rapidly changing what we understand about how they did it. And the new answers are genuinely surprising. They do not require lost civilizations. They require acknowledging that the Egyptians were far more ingenious than the standard textbook image of thousands of laborers dragging stones across the desert. In 2024, an international team of researchers published a study in the journal Communications, Earth, and Environment. They used radar satellite imagery to map a previously unknown ancient branch of the Nile River, a 64-kilometer-long waterway that once ran directly alongside 31 pyramids, including the Giza complex. The branch, which they named the Ahramat Channel, Arabic for pyramids, has been buried under farmland and desert for millennia, invisible to conventional archaeology. But satellite-penetrating radar saw it, and sediment cores drilled from the ground confirmed it. This changes everything about the pyramid transportation problem. For a long time, one of the great puzzles has been why the pyramids were built where they are. The Giza complex sits on the edge of the Sahara Desert, far from the modern Nile, It looks like an odd location, but if the ancient branch of the Nile once ran right past the construction site, then the Egyptians were not hauling stones across the desert at all. They were floating them, using the river, the same way they were already doing everything else in their civilization. The Nile was their highway, and they built their greatest monuments at a point where that highway came to them. Then, in 2025, a French research team led by civil engineer Xavier Landreau published a peer-reviewed study in PLOS One proposing something even more striking about the Step Pyramid of Djoser at Saqqara. The Step Pyramid is the oldest pyramid in Egypt, built around 2680 BC, and Landreau's team found evidence that its construction may have involved a hydraulic lift system powered by water. Not alien technology, not lost civilization technology, water. The Egyptians redirected floodwaters from the Nile through a system of trenches and internal shafts within the pyramid structure, and researchers believe this water pressure may have been used to float massive stone blocks upward during construction, from the center, like a slow-motion hydraulic elevator made of desert engineering. The Egyptians were already famous hydraulic engineers. They built irrigation canals across the Nile Delta. They moved enormous stone blocks on barges across the river. Applying that same water management knowledge to the vertical dimension of pyramid construction is not a leap. It is a logical extension of skills they already had. And Landreau's team found evidence of a small dam structure adjacent to the pyramid site that could have controlled the water flow needed for exactly this kind of system. And then in March 2026, computer scientist Vicente Luis Rosell Roig published a study in the journal NPJ Heritage Science, presenting a new computational model for how the Great Pyramid of Giza was built. His model proposes what he calls an integrated edge ramp, a hidden spiral pathway built into the outer edge of the pyramid itself as it rose, allowing workers to haul blocks upward through the growing structure rather than up a massive external ramp. The model was tested using parametric geometry, discrete event logistics simulation, and finite element analysis. It found that with this system, limestone blocks could have been placed every 4 to 6 minutes, and the entire pyramid could have been completed within 20 to 27 years, consistent with the historical record. The model also found that the geometry is consistent with internal voids that have already been detected inside the pyramid using muon imaging technology. This is what real breakthrough archaeology looks like. Not a chatbot making up numbers. Real researchers, real data, real institutions, real peer review, reaching real conclusions that upend the textbook picture and replace it with something more accurate, more nuanced, and honestly more extraordinary. Because think about what these discoveries actually mean when you put them together. The Egyptians were sophisticated enough to locate a 64-kilometer branch of the Nile and build 31 major pyramid complexes along its banks, using the river as a construction transportation network. They were sophisticated enough to design hydraulic water lifting systems inside their earliest pyramids to raise multi-ton stone blocks without external ramps. They were sophisticated enough to engineer a spiral ramp system integrated directly into the growing structure of the Great Pyramid, allowing continuous block placement at a rate of 1 block every few minutes. And they were sophisticated enough to drill through granite using corundum abrasive powder and copper tube drills, producing holes with the kind of consistent precision that only becomes possible when you deeply understand material science. None of that requires a lost civilization. None of that requires ancient alien technology. None of that requires industrial diamond rotary cutters or a chatbot that never actually analyzed anything. What it requires is something harder for some people to accept. It requires accepting that ancient human beings were brilliant, that they solved problems we still struggle to fully understand today, using the materials they had available through a combination of accumulated knowledge, organizational genius, and engineering creativity that we have consistently underestimated. Dr. Zahi Hawass, the most famous Egyptologist in the world, confirmed a few years ago, based on tomb inscriptions and worker burial sites, that the pyramid builders were not slaves. They were skilled laborers, people who held titles, whose tombs were decorated with images of them doing their work, people who were paid, people who received medical care, people who were fed and housed by a state that understood their value. The tombs contain hieroglyphic titles like overseer of the side of the pyramid and craftsman. These were professionals, and they built one of the most extraordinary collections of structures in the history of human civilization. Now, here's the part that is genuinely unresolved. Even with all the new research, there are things we still do not fully know. We do not have complete certainty about exactly how the massive granite ceiling beams inside the Great Pyramid were placed, beams that weigh up to 60 tons each, positioned inside a chamber hundreds of feet off the ground. We do not have a definitive confirmed explanation for how blocks were raised to the upper portions of the structure when a spiral ramp would have become increasingly difficult to maintain at those heights. We do not fully understand how the blocks were cut to tolerances so tight that a blade cannot be slipped between them at sites like the Valley Temple near Giza. There are unsolved problems here, real ones, the kind that motivate real scientists to keep doing real research. And there are things inside the Great Pyramid itself that have not yet been opened. In 2023, the Scan Pyramids project detected a 9-meter corridor on the north side of the Great Pyramid, the first new passage found there in modern times. In 2025, Zahi Hawass announced that a 30-meter corridor detected by advanced scanning technology leads to a sealed door that has not been opened in thousands of years. When that door opens, the world will change. Not because of aliens, not because of lost technology, because real information about how this civilization actually worked will be available for the first time in recorded history. That is the actual mystery. A real sealed door behind a real 30-meter corridor inside the most famous building on Earth. Nobody knows what is behind it. Real archaeologists are working to find out right now. That story is happening. It is ongoing. It does not need fabricated statistics or fake researchers or AI chatbots making things up to be one of the most compelling archaeological stories of the 21st century. So here is what you actually need to know. When you see a video claiming that Grok AI analyzed ancient stone and found evidence of lost technology, check the description. There will be a disclaimer. The video is entertainment. The researchers named in it likely do not exist. The numbers quoted were invented by an AI writing tool, not measured by a scientist. The famous archaeologist whose name is invoked almost certainly has no idea their reputation is being used. And when you want the real story, the one that is actually mind-bending, the one that involves a lost branch of the Nile running alongside 31 pyramids, hydraulic water lifts inside Egypt's oldest pyramid, spiral construction ramps hidden inside the Great Pyramid itself, a sealed door that no living person has ever passed through, that story is out there, in peer-reviewed journals, published by real researchers at real institutions, with real data that can be checked, verified, replicated, and built upon. The Egyptians were extraordinary. Their achievement does not need to be explained by anything other than what they actually were, one of the most intelligent, organized, and engineering-capable civilizations in the history of our species. And we are still learning exactly how they did it. In 2026, with all of our satellites and our scanners and our computational models and our muon detectors, we are still figuring it out. That is the real story. No chatbot required.